And we should be live.
We're live. Welcome everyone to this week's Stopping the Violence webinar. We've been going on for how long, Nadia? About 2 years now. Going on 2 years? Yeah, and it's been a wonderful journey. Why? Originally, we started off with dealing with gun violence. And then we realized, as I have coined, that gun is an inanimate object. What causes a person to pick up a gun and harm their fellow citizen? That's where the rubber truly meets the road. And I think that can play a really critical role in decreasing and reducing crime. If we get to the problem, what is the root problem of people's behaviors that allows them to harm their fellow citizen? And so this program has been extraordinary. My name is Reverend Gregory James Oliver, and I am the Vice President UPF, which really sponsors this. Well, we have found out that there's various several wonderful people out there who are what I call silos on their own or islands on their own that have been working in the area of prevention, area of post, you know, uh, programs to deal with violence or whatever violent crimes or how it's manifested within our communities. Doing an excellent job, but they're silos on their own, it seems. How do we bring them together in a collective, almost a collective pot, and have um, um, a national agenda centered around the best practices that are working in a very small way in communities around the United States, and best thinkers? So we've had a few mayors over the years to come on. We had other political leaders and religious leaders come on, and we have social advocates and several people have come on to really help us to see insights on how things can work if we all work together. But today I have even a special guest her dad happens to be a very good friend of mine. And I mentioned it to him about our webinar. He said, "Oh, my daughter is so really engrossed in that. I mean, she's passionate about certain things about this, and she's writing things." And something he said that hit me, Taylor, as I introduce you, was looking at the environment piece. The environment piece really is actually what really continues to pop up in any area that we deal with the stopping the violence. So let me just give a little bit. Her name is Taylor Cummings, and is the MEd Circle Curriculum Educator and an instructor. She has a BA in Social Development and Cultural Exchange. She's working on her PhD in Educational Psychology at the University of Nevada in Las Vegas, and whose research explores complex systems, belonging, and peace-centered society. Love it. Excellent. And diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, that she's working with DEIJ, and you explain that more for us, and fellow others in the UNLV College of Education, currently serving on the December 6th, you can explain that to her, memorial committee for scholars who lost their lives in shootings. So we look forward. And what we're asking our dear sister, to young lady, our future, now future, to come on and share, because of the fact that a lot of things were in latent preparation. We wanted to give her time just to give us a little synopsis, and then we can have a question and answer. Then I said, we need a part two where you can come on and give us more of your data, which a lot of people need data to understand really what's going on and how you see yourself and the avenues that you're taking to tackle this issue. And so we're really happy to see you. Welcome. And the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful to be here. And as you mentioned, my journey did start with looking at social development and cultural change and really understanding, okay, there's a lot of problems in this world. How do we address them? And so I started moving more into, how do we address complex social issues? And I started finding complex systems literature. And that's really where my research has guided me. And so, as you mentioned, I'm currently a doc student at University of Nevada, Las Vegas. We recently had a shooting on our campus, December 6th, and we lost some scholars there. We had 3 faculty members who were shot on campus, a fourth one that's been injured, who's choosing to remain anonymous. And so I've been serving on that committee as I have relationships with the Peace Angels Project, which works with the United Nations. They melt down weapons, nuclear missiles, weapons from the local community, and they make 64-foot peace angels as a symbol of hope and peace and sustainability for our communities. So that's some of the work I'm currently doing. But it all comes, like you said, a matter of belonging. How do we live in this world together with all these differing ideologies, all these differing beliefs, and some of these behaviors that cause us to do, very disastrous things. I think you're muted, Reverend. I think
Can
you're.
you hear me now? I couldn't find my button. Yeah, just give us a little bit more synopsis and then I'll ask you a few questions, okay? Or what that means to you. And then, like I said, we said we could do a part two, which will allow you to do a little bit more searching, give us some data on all of that, you know. Go ahead.
So for me, the way that I'm approaching, looking at a lot of these complex social issues is understanding not only how they work together, like you mentioned, in their silos and all these different problems and all these different areas of human activity. So we know we have issues in education, we have issues in labor and law and entertainment, religion, sex, war. We have all these different areas of human activity that cause a lot of issues. And so we often try to solve these problems in each of their own separate corridors, but really understanding the interconnectedness of these problems is really integral to how I think, is best to approach these problems. And then I'm also looking at what it looks like to approach these problems in a holistic manner. So how do we really address social problems at its most holistic level of society, which some believe is its collective consciousness? So I really get into working with individuals from the inside out, because we know what causes a lot of people to cause harm in the world is because of their perceptions, their feelings, their beliefs, a lot of trauma. And recently I met with Congressman, our youngest congressman, Maxwell Frost. He's a Gen Z congressman related to the December 6th shooting. He came, he visited, we got to have a roundtable conversation. And I mentioned in that conversation something that Kamala Harris mentioned, and she was saying that trauma is not passed down. And I had to correct that, because when they were talking about why people do, horrible things and they just have the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, I think it's really important to know the function of trauma in our society, the function of trauma in our lives, and how it really impacts our daily decision making. And so being able to really understand the pattern of trauma is important. And so in my research, I work with the individual level, understanding how that impacts us, but also what that looks like, with other people and community with others.
Yeah, that's so true. And that is an incorrect statement because trauma is passed down somewhere along the line. And especially if you're traumatized and wherever that trauma stems in your ancestry and you're still in that environment and then it compounds it, in that area. So yeah, trauma is passed on. And even when people talk about addiction, they're saying that if there's certain genes or something that if one of your parents or your grandparents or have that, then you're more prone to have that same alcoholic addiction. And so somehow, I don't know if it's scientific, but anyway, they've seen that it's worked. So no, and we have to look at those things more succinctly, and think society or the system doesn't look at it succinctly because it opens up a can of worms in many ways. It begins to remind us that there's an elephant in the room. Why don't we look at the situations, environmental situations that are perpetuating those type of violent behaviors?
Yeah, recently in Vegas, there's a Senate concurrent resolution that went out that was really helping to look more at the social determinants of health and how our environment's impacting us, especially as it relates to racial oppression. And that's a big thing that we're dealing with. So they did declare racism as the number one public health crisis facing the state of Nevada. And so that is something that, is being paid more attention to, and I think is really important to understand how it's affecting us. And so that's a lot of what my work looks at is the psychosocial, spiritual effects of navigating racially oppressive environments and how to protect our minds and really free our minds and decolonize the mind from or from oppressive, understandings and policies and practices.
Yeah, so how do you see that? Just give me a little synopsis of
Well, I
how do
deal with
you see that?
worldview. So my background is in education. And so I understand we all code through this K through 12 system. And that's really where we're understanding the foundations of the world, the foundations of reality. Who's who, what's what, what's the body, where are we, what's the maps? And I started to find out, okay, I don't know that we're actually getting an accurate depiction of what's really going on here, especially if you just look at the maps, right? I teach college students, and one of the first things I show them is how our maps have been distorted. So, all right, our understanding of where we even are in this world is very important to address and to correct in order for us to be in our right mentality. And so, for me, it's all about the deconstruction process and the unlearning process, and then coming into what I like to consider an African-centered mindset. And so really understanding the differences in Eurocentric values, Eurocentric worldviews, Eurocentric principles, and then trying to get back into, what's more natural to us as Black Americans or Black African people.
Very interesting. Like I said, that we're going to have a part two on this one. But uh, so yeah, I would have like actually I would like to next week I'm going to have Jim Edgerly, who's a European American that really does this study as well, and have you on. Maybe I'll do that because what you struck up was the word, operative word for me in your last statement was reconstruction. Um, and I think historically, America has had a reconstruction period, but somehow it didn't work because of the fact that I think we didn't do the right house cleaning, if you will. So we didn't recalibrate the thinking of the two opponents and see why it's important for this reconstruction and how what you need to let go of, what you need to let go of, how we can and create the right access for the betterment of the country. So those things didn't work out. So I think there were several symbolic reconstruction eras. The 60s was a reconstruction. That's where I come from. I might be a little tad bit older than your dad, but I come in the 60s, came from the 60s, and I think that became acknowledgement that there's a problem that needs to be healed so that we can make a better America and a better people. And it didn't happen. And I think maybe this is another cycle where, a reconstruction. Now you just said, the mapping, and we can look at even the maps of how societies became instrumental in becoming foremost in influencing the world. You can start with what is it, Italy back in the day, in Rome, and it started in that peninsula, and then it went to another peninsula, then it wound up in American peninsula, and there's historical reasons why. What do you feel about that?
I think understanding the historical trajectory is important for how we came into being because I think that's where a lot of our misconceptions lie. So, when we're talking about the origin of humanity, a lot of people lean into whiteness. A lot of people lead into, this understanding that Europe sort of was like this foundational aspect of civilization or even Greek philosophy and things of that nature. So, I think going back to the origins is really important. And that's why I live a lot in philosophy because our philosophical understanding is what undergirds our societies. And so when we look to the Greeks or we look to, these other groups to sort of lead us the way forward, when we know that they've gotten their information or maybe even stolen their information from African people, it allows a misguidance of, how we understand the world and how we're moving forward based on inaccurate information at the beginning and at the foundation.
Yeah, one of the things, another operative word for you, for me, that you mentioned, and which I personally work on, And I think if we, as we go and we're going around the circle here, and I think it goes back to understanding violence. Okay, what's the root? Some of the root causes of violence is, that violence is not just indicative of the Black community. It's a Hispanic community, it's a white community. Each one has their different categories, and each one has their different kinds of triggers. Right now, I think we're just discussing the trigger of the most targeted community. If you think of violence in America, what community do you think of? You think of the African American community as such. So that, as we go on, one of the operative words that you said as we are diverting and then coming around this circle was worldview.
Yeah.
I think a worldview is a very powerful statement. And
Yeah,
could you give me that? Go
I
ahead.
will just mention something because you said when you think about violence in America, you think about Black people. I personally do not. I think about Jim Crow, I think about segregation, I think about the violence that white people have plagued on Black Americans from the beginning of its time. So that's what I think about. And I think those perceptions and the worldviews that we've been socialized to accept is to think about Black people when we think about violence. I've sat in classrooms where we haven't mentioned Black people the entire semester. And then when you're talking about a culture of violence, you want to show me Black people, you want to show me indigenous tribes. And I've had to call it out because white folks, Europeans, have been the most violent on our planet since the beginning of time. And I think our understanding of philosophy and our understanding of worldview comes back to that because that's where we got some of the duality. Like there was a oneness that existed prior to, the inception of European American thought and thinking about how they, they separate everything, and so there's like this cohesion that comes, and that's why I use complex systems because it allows you to look at the whole picture at once, and that's something that's natural to African people that may not necessarily be natural to Europeans.
Yes. Yes, and I agree with you. You watch my past, I understand that I would say well, this is about healing, right?
Yeah.
Eventually we have to heal the nation. America is a melting pot of all the world's people. God's plan was that, I'd say he brought, excuse me, he brought all his knuckleheads from everywhere and said, I'm going to convert you on this one land called America. And then I want you guys to work something out. America has become the place for working that out. And I think that's why we're discussing this piece. But I think, I was sitting with a pool of psychologists, and they were talking about two boys, and each boy had very similar backgrounds and similar anger issues. And when they did the final analysis of the two boys, one was Johnny and one was Tyrone. And Tyrone was from the inner city, and Johnny was white American. And so when they came up with the final analysis, they said that Tyrone was hostile. Now, same environment issues that triggered there, and then but Johnny was expressing himself. So what I'm saying here is, how do we begin to break down those misnomers or those things so that we can bring healing to both
Yeah.
Johnny and and
Yeah.
uh, and Tyrone, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So that we can make a better America, in a whole, because God is colorblind, you know that, right? And for me, and I believe that if we say we're children of God, that means we're all brothers and sisters, correct? So how do we bring the healing? The problem is not God, the problem is us. How do we look at those, the right construct, if you will, in order to bring healing and to bring a certain amount of unity, especially when it comes between the races? What do you think of that?
Well, I love your example because I'm currently doing restorative justice training with teachers in the school district out here in Las Vegas. And that's some of the things that we're talking about this week is understanding behavior as being misunderstood. And we're looking especially at some of those preconceived notions of how, Black students or Latino students may be treated compared to their white counterparts. And I think one of the main things that's really important to start to address some of those disproportionalities that we see is to be real about our biases, you know? So what underlying biases might we have because of our worldviews, because of the way that we were socialized in a racist society? I think that's step number one. Okay, what preconceived notions do I have? What stereotypes might I hold, whether consciously or unconsciously or subconsciously? And start to bring those things to the forefront and start having honest discussions about one, what that looks like, how it influences our interactions and decision making, and then what it can look like to really come forward and create new stereotypes, but new ways of being and seeing each other in the world so that we can have harmonious relationships.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's correct. And the more I think about it, the more we will have a part two. I want Jim Edgerly to come on. And Jim is he's working, he's a very unique European, and he's looking at the same things, those points. I would like to see you two dialogue. So we will have a part two. But as what I said, now I want to look at, since we're just focusing right now, we want to look at all communities.
Mhm.
Like you said, that we can categorize them. Which one has, each one has different triggers that causes them to express it in violence. Let's say since we're going historically, you come out of African Americans are coming out of slavery or whatever. And I don't think that there was any counseling done for the trauma from the beginning. And then you put them into tents, and then they went from tents to projects. And then this is what we get, we see out there, because there wasn't a healing point or anyone to deal with the trauma. How do you see that particular trauma playing a very critical role in the violence you see in these so-called at-risk communities?
Yes, well, Dr. Joy DeGroy is one of my favorite scholars, and she coined the post-traumatic slave syndrome. And she really walks through that process of what it looked like to be freed and then to just be okay, we're just here. You know, like you said, there was no training, there was no counseling, there was no learning how to operate in society, there was no learning how to be with one another, your families, you may not even know where they are, you know, and so we see that. And then what we've learned to how to survive, we've still been doing. So it's really how I understand it is Black folks in America, we've been in survival mode, you know, so it's really about taking a step back, taking the time to see, okay, what's been done, and then what do we need? What supports do we need to make sure that we're our healthiest people? And that starts, I think, with the family and understanding of the, who am I? What is my role in that? What does it mean to be a mother? What does it mean to be a father? What does it mean to be a brother, to be a sister, to be a friend, to be an aunt, to be an uncle? And then how do we start actualizing that and practicing that in real time and in society? I think it's some of the first steps. And then it's a matter of helping us learn how to regulate our emotions. And then self-determination is really where it's at for me personally. That's also a leading theory in a lot of the educational psychology motivation literature, as well as, you know, a leading tenet in the Black Panther Party and then other, you know, across the United Nations. Self-determination is something that we're all trying to actualize. So I think that's important too.
Yeah, so one of the things, Joy DeGruy happens to be one of my favorite persons as well. I've read the book, and plus I've also watched her videos that are stunning, and they're very powerful and very realistic. So I look at there's various ways that historically we've tried to address that problem. But I always have one, and I wanted to share with you. So when we look at, and one thing that I like, Joy, she says, what manner of people we are. And why I say that is, even though we've gone through this historical trauma, we still surmounted tremendous odds, and great minds, speakers like your dad has arrived, and like your mom, I can hear, I don't see her face, but I can hear the way she speaks, and you rise. So what does that account to? And it wasn't based on, any violence or just attacking whites, but we still surmounted tremendous odds and rose to become people of great conscience. How do you see that? And why is that not part of the equation, if you will, in helping to educate those people who are more at risk and might not have the same exposure as yourself?
I think it is a key to helping those who may be more at risk because I think what has been done was to suppress our greatness, to suppress our great consciousness, to suppress our ability. And I think a big part of being able to actualize our full potential is understanding exactly what that full potential is. And I think we've been able to see Black people continue to rise despite all the things that we've experienced because of our true nature, because of that God-given ability that was embedded in us from the very beginning. And I think understanding what that power is what's going to allow us to continue to do that, but to do it even at a greater level, and in a more sustainable way as well. But I think the consciousness, like that is the key, I think, to all of this, understanding what that is and how to utilize it.
And that triggered me because you had mentioned, as I heard real just briefly, the Black Panthers, but there was two segments of people in that era that were dealing with the issue of Black people and America as a whole, because we have to look at this is about America. I believe that God brought everyone here for a divine reason, you know. So it's about America. If it's about America, it's about the world, right? But you had mentioned Black Panther, so there was two segments of people rising, and that was the civil rights movement centered on Martin Luther King, and then of course you had Malcolm X, and then you had the Black Panthers. So that's what triggered me because there are two segments of people who are addressing the healing, but addressing it from a different angle.
Yeah.
How do you see that?
I think off just first glance, to me, it seems a matter of trust, trusting of white people or distrust of white people. And I think that's why we sometimes see some of these lanes where people are more open to the integration process and working together versus some who are like, we should just really stay African centered, stay with our people, stay to ourselves, because we can really, it limits the amount of negativity that we may experience. And so I think the trust or distrust or mistrust of white people may influence that a lot. But I think it also had a lot to do with this idea of sovereignty, and what it really means to be in control of your own faculties, to really make decisions about your own socialization processes, and your resources and the allocation of resources and who's in control of those resources. And I think when we've understood that we have not been in control of our own lives for so long, I think it's really important, I think, for people like the Black Panther Party to say it's time for us to take control of our own destinies. And I think that's really what made the distinction between the two different groups.
So yeah, help me a little bit more. Like I said, we have a part two, but how do you see that in the violence that we have in America? And plus, a lot of the violence in the so-called at-risk communities are really directed to one another.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, poverty, we know, creates these conditions where people feel like they need to do things to survive. And so poverty also is very connected to crime. And so I think when we start to address those underlying issues, then we can start to understand, how to put people in a better position so they're making better choices for themselves. But I think poverty has a lot to do with some of the behavior, and maybe some of the criminal behavior. But we also have literature that speaks to criminality being a social construct, because in one side of the world, some people can do a lot of corruption, a lot of horrible, evil things, but the law is not holding them accountable in that. But then there's other groups of people who are being held accountable for some of the same acts. And so really understanding what crime is, what poverty is, and how to put people in better situations and better conditions overall, I think is what's going to help us see a reducing crime globally.
So one thing you mentioned also, Brian, but um, how about jobs? What do you see that as
I
a
think
key
it's not, it's
component?
about what types of jobs, what type of work are people doing? Is this work purposeful? Is this work fulfilling? I don't think it's enough just to give somebody something to get up and go to every day to make a little money just to make ends meet. I think it really is about putting people in the best possible position for themselves and their families and providing opportunities where people can live a purposeful, fulfilling life. And I think that's going to help with a lot of our decision making and a lot of our future sustainability.
So that means that there needs to be an educational component.
I think education is a big part of this problem. I think, yeah, correcting our education. Like I said in the beginning, it's first about getting an accurate historical account of what's taken place, and that takes getting everyone's story. Right now, we're operating from a history that's been told by a specific group of people who's been able to dominate that narrative. So having a more inclusive historical account, having a more inclusive educational account is, I think, going to help not only, so multicultural education, I think, is very important. Yes.
Multicultural. That's it. I think it's critically important to have a multicultural educational program, but as well as to understand um, not as a piece. I'm not for separation. I'm for integration. But I know that there's a word. Um, One of Martin Luther King's closest soldiers back in his day. I happened had the many years ago. I had the pleasure and honor to drive him from here, from we were having a program, to the airport, and he was about 80 then. So that was like 20 years ago. So I know he's gone. But as we were driving, he said, uh, you know, son, I need to tell you something. Don't get it confused with the two words segregation and no integration and desegregation.
Mhm.
I didn't catch what for me at the beginning. What were you talking about? And desegregation is that basically I allow you to now pass across the tracks. You might can go to the stores, but integration is mean I allow you to come into my life. And I think that's what's missing, where that integration, the real integration piece, is missing. I think that's why the Reconstruction couldn't come in as
Mhm.
powerful as it was hopefully supposed to do. But again, you look at our crime system. Then what do you think is the motivating force of those people who are like you said, they came over, came to the campus and just shot up a whole bunch of people on the campus, and of course, the guy in Las Vegas who just mauled over people down on the Strip, etc. What do you think about those violence? And those people are not, you know, of the people of color, but sometimes they're of European descent. So what do you think is a motivating factor in that kind of violence?
I think there's differing factors. I think I can speak specifically to December 6th and that memorial shooting. What the evidence that's been coming out related to that story was this was a man who had been a professor in um different universities and had been trying to get a job at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and was rejected from that. And so this was an attack, I guess, maybe on his own confidence. He felt rejected, felt like revengeful, and wanted to make some sort of statement. And he came onto our campus and shot three of our faculty members. But I think if we just look at the neuroscience of it all, it can come from attention-seeking behavior. It can come from so many different ways, and that people choose to act out. But I think at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with our social condition. And I deal a lot with the existential questions of who am I? What am I doing here? Why am I here? And I think people don't have a sense of purpose, it really misguides them and doesn't really allow them to stay, on a path that's going to help them actualize the true things that they would like to do. But I think there's many reasons that motivate people to do
Well, I
crime.
see. Thank you for that. And I think I do see a parallel. That's what I want to get as just human beings in general, whether
Yeah.
you're black, you're white. You said two operative words for me: dejection, feeling dejected, and seeking attention. So that is probably what Joy would also say, while some of our ill or dysfunctional behaviors are stemming from. That was a
Yeah.
lack of. So also him being a professor or whatever, European descent, I don't know exactly, but also as a human being, those are some of the trigger points that causes people to go outside of themselves and harm the other fellow man. So you have it, dejection and
Yeah.
uh, seeking attention.
Yeah. And so belonging is a big part of my research, and that looks like feeling accepted, respected, supported, and included in your environment. And when you don't have those things, we see a lot of adverse psychological effects and things of that nature. So it's definitely about feeling seen, heard, knowing that you exist, you have value, and what that value really looks like. Because it's not the value of, oh, you're worth X amount of money, so I can sell you, but true inherent, value as a human being, on this planet.
Right. Good. Well said. Well said. Now that I'd just like to open up the door for anyone else. I know that Andrea had been sending several uh, points. Let me see. Andrea, where are you? I saw you. Andrea, did you wanted to share that with us? Some of the points that you had just shared with us on the chat. Let me see. Here we go. Let me go here. Uh, Thank you for your comments of violence. Even in contemporary times in America, the majority of the mass shootings have been carried out by white men. And she had mentioned that. And your mom said the caste systems of race in the U.S. needs to be dismantled before we will begin to see real change. We have all been conditioned within the system, and violence is directed in proximity. So I think you were alluding to that point, and actually, Andrea had just mentioned that point as well. Anybody else would like to share some points? Mom, you don't have to write. You can come on and you can say something as well. We look forward to hearing you as well, Mrs. Cummings.
Yes, good afternoon. Well, I can't turn on my camera right now. But
Problem.
but a lot of the things that Taylor, I'm so proud of you and the way that you've been able to articulate and speak on this subject. And a lot of the things that you're saying or alluding to, I've been reading Isabel Wilkerson's book on the caste system right now. And just a lot of things that it has gotten me to actually rethink about this country and why, when you talk about the trauma, right, that's passed down from generation because the system is still in place, right? Even in the 20s, with century are we in right now, that there are still people who we really got to see it in 2016 when, the political environment changed and you saw a group of people now trying to show their dominant ability towards people who they considered in the subordinate caste, right? So that's when the police being called on people trying to get into their own house, the police being called on people, driving a good car. Is this your car? Does it belong to you? So I think even today, we're still dealing with those things and the bubble bursts. And so you see people manifesting behaviors in retaliation to that. So you might see more violence because when your back is up against the wall, you have to respond, right? And so I think this system is something that we really need to focus on. And how do we change the model? Because you talked about Reconstruction. The Reconstruction wasn't going to happen because they weren't going to dismantle this system. So how do we move? How do we get to a place now where we look at this made up social construct of race, right? And look at people as people, and that we're able to move within this space as, just as individual human people and, be kind to one another. I don't know. So Taylor, like, what do we think about, this system and trying to, reconstruct it or deconstruct it?
Well, I think that's obviously what has to happen, right? We have to deconstruct what's happened. And I felt you, Reverend, trying to, keep us kumbaya all on one accord. But and I am there. I am totally there. And I understand the human race, and I understand we are all human beings here trying to have a wonderful, beautiful experience. But we have to address the heinous things and the heinous crimes that have taken place over time. And it's going to be uncomfortable and it's not going to feel good, but it's not an indictment on any individual who exists here, but it's understanding our socio-historical political context of how we got here. And so when we have these conversations of the violence of white folks, even at the hand of religion, so we use a lot of spiritual concepts to try to solve these problems. We try to use Christianity, we try to use Islam, but we had the Arab slave trade, we have the transatlantic slave trade. These things were confirmed, and they were guided by a lot of these religious principles too. So it really is about having these conversations as we try to move forward and really getting into the nitty gritty of the things that have caused a lot of people a lot of pain over the years, and how we can start to redirect a lot of our energies to create systems that don't cause religious trauma or religious harm or social trauma or social harm.
I understand. Uncle has to go kumbaya as well, because of the fact, let me tell you something, when I do that, and it's because ultimately, God is looking for healing of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Know that that's the idealism that I stay up, I stay up there. However, in reality, you have to deal with certain constructs in order to get there.
Yeah.
And sometimes we were avoiding those constructs because, as you said, because they're uncomfortable. I started off with the elephant in the room, right? So there's elephants in the room. So, but, that's where it comes in, because idealism, even the Black Panther, they had their motive in this misunderstanding. It's like Black Lives Matter. I love the name, but there are people who have nefarious agenda doesn't have anything to do with really seeing us really sing, because on the same street that they're talking about the Black Lives Matter and breaking and doing all those things on the street, on that exact same street, there's a Black club down the street. That same day, 2 or 3 Black kids were killed, killing each other. I said, why don't you go and you deal with that problem? What is the core root of these Black on Black crimes that has everything to do with the part of the system, but you don't want to heal that? So that means that you really don't want to heal. You just want to use me or use us as a platform for whatever agenda you have that doesn't really have the agenda to really bring healing and justice or goodness to the Black community and also America as a whole. That's how I see it. And I see Dad has his thing. I have a comment. So Dexter, Mr. Cummings, please unmute yourself and share with us.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it short. Thank you, Reverend. And everyone should know I met the Reverend at the UN General Assembly meetings this past year, and I'm grateful to have done so. I've met him. This dialogue was a good dialogue, and Taylor has an insight that I think, in a depth of understanding and way of looking at these things and this problem and this challenge that I think gives us a hint of a solution or a way to address it, in a framework in which we can address it. And I think it's centered not so much on just the frameworks that exist currently and the caste system and the things that we know, but the things that we don't necessarily want to think about: the individual, the place of the individual, and how what we are doing and how we create these spaces, really affects and impact people on a daily basis. And we ascribe, and the things that we ascribe to those people in those communities and those conditions. So I think that, that's why I love her research. And I, more importantly, love the way that she approaches the research And because it comes from a place that's centered on individuals and eventually focuses on science and the very foundations, right, of humanity and our place in the universe and us trying to find and understand our place in the universe. So those are the things that I think no matter where you end up, once you begin to explore those, it kind of makes us all the same to a certain extent. And it levels the playing field and it makes you ask and answer the hard questions about yourself, how you interact, and the decisions that you make, and to then hopefully lead you to a better understanding and a common understanding, hopefully, about the universal truths, if you will. And I don't think that, and again, it's what we know today doesn't necessarily define what will be known, and it stops what we know will know tomorrow, right? Quantum mechanics, AI, pushing the boundaries, and it's going to be infinitesimal. And we just have to, the thing that keeps us grounded or can keep us grounded is a sense of self, understanding, and then trying to figure out, our place in it, in our connections to one another, and on the planet, right, that we're living on, in the space that we're living in. And so that's why I love her research. And when she first shared with me in undergraduate school, Dad, this doesn't make sense. Complex systems. I found it. And she just ran to it. And that's how she got to UNLV, one of the top universities in that field that uses this methodology. It made sense. And I'm just, I'll say this, I'm just very proud, not just the person who she is, but the way that she thinks and in her heart. And so, and I think, everyone that's listening to this, they should really try to, I would love for them to comment and to think of and push, because that's the way that I think the good stuff really happens. All right. And so I'll leave it there. And I thank you for giving us this platform, allowing us to join me.
I would like to address I focus more on the violent piece. What's the and this is we're talking about root cause as a directed to a certain demographics, if you will. However, prior to this, I had my another program that I did, a webinar called Mental Health in the African American Community. And why? Because we don't talk about mental health in our community. It's almost like a no-no. You don't talk about those things. But I said, no, we need to talk about those things, because we need to know what is the root cause of our mental health and mental health piece, and it all comes into that part. It's trauma, joy to group, all that works in. So we've had some really good discussion. So I wanted to bring that mental health piece, because it does affect us emotionally. And to what Dexter, your dad, was saying, where our place is. Now, I've written a paper, I don't usually say this, but I've already written papers, what's the holdup? So what I do is I do the comparison of what African Americans have been contributing to America since the 1700s. Extraordinary stuff. But what has been the impending, what has been the parts, the areas where it's not allowed to come out? It wasn't, the holdup. It's always pushed back somewhere. And that means that also the white Americans also, they have their place. And I show where both have their place. So I agree. It's always, to me, when I talk about the idea, I'm saying also in the construct of what our place is. Our place is more than just the Black race. It's for the betterment of humanity, and it's always been. You see, I do work in Africa, and I do work, and I've always say, use this. How do we extract those geniuses with the pants hanging down, get them to the right exposure, so they can be the viable citizens and the viable contributors to humanity as they can be? And that's helpful. That's why I said to you, Taylor, when I was mentioning about exposure. Without that proper exposure, how do you, those same ones that are killing each other or killing, doing all like that, play a critical role in the betterment of society, but they don't have the exposure, then they become the problem, if you will. Go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, I think someone had another comment, but
Oh, somebody had something else to say?
yeah,
Oh,
related
go ahead.
to mental.
No, go ahead, Taylor, and then we get back to the mental health piece, and then
All right,
Andrea. Yeah, Andrea, did you
you-
want to say something?
Sorry, I can't. I'm surrounded with kids.
Oh, yeah, that's what I thought I see you said. Yeah, but thank you
Could
for
you
writing
repeat your
it.
question?
Having to, yeah, to go from, drive back tonight in the car.
Could you repeat your question, Reverend, please? I'm sorry.
No.
I just do what's best for me.
Okay,
You guys
so
run for work?
I think you have to mute Nadia. Okay, thank you. No, my question, I said, and I think Dad wants to say something about mental health in the Black community. And then my other question, or my other statement was the viable, and because he triggered something when he said, what is our place? You see, and I think the place is better than what the system wants to tell us or tell humanity. So I did a paper writing
Oh, yes,
that,
yes.
yeah, writing all of that to show that our place has been viable, constructive since the 1700s, you see.
Well, even
And then,
I would even argue long before, because we are the origin of humanity. We are the mothers and fathers of all people on the planet. And so if we
no, we
correct our
came over from Africa already with a powerful spirituality and a powerful, and I don't want to go there because our uncle has research too. I agree with you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I agree that we came here, we are the origin of
Yeah.
civilization, humanity, and all the wonderful things. And so now that we see the situation that we're in now, one, I think you mentioned the comment about the man with the sagging pants. We have to understand the genius that lies in that saggy pants man, and not in thinking that because his pants are sagging that he's not capable, right? So I think it starts with some of those self-image, self-perception things and sort of eliminating the respectability politics, this idea that I have to act a certain way or look a certain way or talk a certain way for me to be capable or to be genius or for my genius to be recognized. And so starting to, nurture and cultivate a lot of that talent that already exists in a lot of our poverty-stricken communities, I think is a wonderful first step. And then I deal a lot with self-love in my research, especially as it relates to motivation and belonging, because of all the, anti-Blackness and the internalized stuff that we have to undo. And that's what causes us to cause harm to our brothers and sisters, because we don't see ourselves in them. We don't see ourselves in each other as we move through the world, no matter what you look like, or our environment. We don't see ourselves in the trees or the plants or the stars or the sun. So we don't really treat our environment in the same way that our ancestors did. And so having a new perspective on how we see ourselves and how we see our world and how we see ourselves in the world, I think is definitely a great starting point for addressing some of these issues.
Actually, if you do it, and when I have that second, if you, I have the definitions of worldview. A worldview is actually that, and that's why America is great, because actually you explained it, how we see ourselves. And then if you see yourself the way, then you dictate how people address you. You see, and that's how America has even become, because it has a very excellent worldview. I want to thank Esther, your daddy. I think you wanted to mention on the mental health piece, and then I'm going to say one last point, and then I want you to close it out, Taylor.
Yeah, I think you touched on it, Reverend, that the mental health piece and how we and it's akin to the mental health and spirituality a lot, right? To a certain extent. And that spirituality can take many different forms. But it's the thing that it gives you, the individual, that feeling, that sense of belonging, as Taylor would say, but a place in the world is what really allows people to actualize the power and to connect, right, with let's call it the physical world, right, in a way that really allows them to master it and to do it. And now we just need to do it in more healthy ways, right? Because we have the things from our past that demonstrate to us what happens when we don't, and when we don't recognize our power, and we don't think of things holistically and collectively, right? And so I think that's the real power that what Taylor's perspective, at least the one she's brought home to me, has really sort of shaped it. And we're seeing it play out. And I'm just going to bring it to the 21st century with respect to GIS and all the AI and all the tools. All those things are now centering on biology and understanding, right, of what is, okay? And so the foundations of what this is. And so it's getting there and it's allowing us to get there exponentially faster than ever thought of before. And so we need to embrace that. And we need to understand that, again, as Taylor would say, you could say it in a narrative, that we're ultimately, and I guess we all are sort of at the foundation, right, of creation, right, to a sense. And so when we get to that point or close to that point, I think it'll become a little bit easier for us to fathom. But again, we need to have that understanding and bring that into the technology, the way we approach it, and more importantly, how we design and build our communities and our relationships with one another. And I think that's the beauty of what I see with what the way she's approaching it, and the complex systems built for AI. So I'll leave it there. And then, like I said, I thank you for the platform, and it's been
About y'all that just my final statement is one point. Taylor has several beautiful and wonderful operative words, and one was dealing with the saggy pants. And I have another nonprofit called the National Faith-Based Empowerment Coalition, and it was dealing with development of the community and the gentrification process. And I had to stand before BlackRock and all these big, huge companies, Wall Street companies, and share my point where I was getting at why it's good not to just gentrify, but to create a quaff or money that you don't push the stakeholders out. You use that to help the stakeholders in their ingenious way to become viable citizens and contributors to the community that they have already been in, okay? So they can live next to you and we can live next to you, and it's great. But one of the things I said in conjunction with you said was that you can talk about those guys with the saggy pants all you want, those drug boys all you want. But I tell you one thing, I'm gonna tell you what they're doing. They're counting money. They are administrating. They are doing product service. They're doing everything it takes that is translated in corporate CV or bio or resume that will allow them to get a six-figure job easy. And they're doing it with a fifth grade education and making millions. So right away, if we had changed the narrative where that exposure, then you would have already big time businessmen who are coming from that community making even trillions of dollars. So with a fifth grade education, they're making millions of dollars, but they're administrating. So I understand that there are geniuses out there, and this is why that are subjected, if you will, to an environment that is more conducive for them to have express violent behaviors. And this is where we want to come on. We're coming to the point where we're saying if this, maybe we will see reduction in crime behavior. And I think there's some stats that can say those things as well. So Taylor, I want to thank you so much, and I want you to have the last word.
No, I thank you. And I appreciate you saying that because I do think it's all about how we look at it. You know, if you look at a guy who sells drugs and you just see the drugs and you don't see all the other skills that come with it, I think that helps to change the narrative. And it's the same with any situation we find ourselves in. I just saw an article, someone got killed over a piece of pizza or something. So, or sneakers stepping on your shoes. So it's a matter of how are you looking at the situation and what are you getting from it, you know, and that can really start to change how we react to certain things. And I think that will help us to make some better choices and start to reduce some of our criminal behavior activity. So.
Well, thank you very much. Well said. I want to thank everyone who has come on. I'm sorry to everyone because everything was a little late. But we're having part 2. Did you want to say something?
And I should say violent behavior and activity, not necessarily criminal. So,
okay, violent. Okay, gotcha. So words are very important. So thank you very much. And we're going to have that part 2. I want to ask Jim to come on. Also, Andrea, they're looking for the part 2. And there's certain other people that I know that are not here that would have loved this dialogue, right? And so, so we're going to have Jim. I'm going to ask Jim to come on. I'm going to send him the copy of this. I can send you a copy of it as well, and then we'll have you on. You are a hope for our future. We want to thank you. I want to thank my dear friend Dexter for allowing you, and thank you for your parents. I have to talk about the structure of family plays an intricate part in who you are and what your makeup in. And so, and sometimes, many times they're lacking that in those communities like that as well. But it's also, there's a certain design to that as well. We'll go on to that another time. But I want to thank everyone for coming on. I want to thank, again, those who have come on, and we have a live audience out there. And we'll see you next week. We'll have Taylor Cummings, and I want to ask Jim Edgerly to come on and have that little dialogue, insightful dialogue. Yeah, so say God bless everyone. Thank you, Nadia. I didn't hear from you, but I think if you want to, yeah, thank you so much for stepping in, and always she's our help. She's assistant. She makes sure many things are polished and concrete. Love you. God bless you. Taylor, has been a blessing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great program.
Yeah.
Awesome, Taylor. Love you. You did an amazing job.
Yes,
It
I
was
agree.
great. Thank you.
She did.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Jagger.
Oh, you. Thank you.
Everybody's speaking today. Wow, this very energy. We have a lot of energy today.
Yeah, thank you, son. Thank you, son. Son is really from Korea. Go ahead. Oh, there she is.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it so much. I have not to speak some, but next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Come back, everybody join together again. We are one under God, and you know, when we stand out like that, we have a bright future, right? Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Reverend Oliver.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for your comments. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. God bless.